Hey groupers, well, we are still sheltering in place, but we're also still studying God's Word, and I hope that you're being encouraged by this series in the Psalms as we're wrestling with some of our emotions. This message, a little different. One of the emotions that we're wrestling with is envy. I was very candid about how I, as a preacher, deal with envy. In my message I shared with you, it's not something that I'm proud of, but it's something that I'm still working on. It's something that I'm constantly talking to God about, constantly praying that God helps me to overcome. There's always a bigger church. There's always a greater preacher. It's a challenge. Well, how about you? Has there been a source in your life of consistent envy? Would you share it with your small group? Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's an in-law or an outlaw. Maybe it's someone that you went to school with. What about you? Well, in the second stanza, really verses 2 and 3, Asaph writes what caused his envy. What was it? How much of your envy is caused by the same thing? Does anything else cause our envy? And then in the third and fourth stanzas, and this is sections verses 4 through 12, Asaph gives a big list of all kinds of things that appear better in the life of the wicked. What does he perceive are the benefits of wickedness? Make a list. Just go through these verses. Make a list of all the things that he puts down as benefits. A big word that you could put over the life of the wicked is self-sufficiency. I mean, it seems so American. In fact, it seems good to say that you're self-sufficient. That seems like something that we want to teach our children to be. What is the danger of self-sufficiency? How can self-sufficiency lead to wickedness? Now, how does envy, that's what we're talking about, how does envy affect our relationship with life? Use this psalm as a primer to give you some ideas, but how does envy affect our relationship with life? How does it affect our relationship with ourselves? How does it affect our relationship with others? And then ultimately, it's a 10 commandment. How does it affect our relationship with God? I think those are all really important. Life, self, others, God. Talk about how envy affects those things. Well, in verse 13, the psalmist tips his hand, his heart hand, if you will, and he shows that his obedience to God was not motivated primarily by love, but it was motivated by duty. He did these things for God so that God would bless him. God, I'll do this and then you owe me. What is wrong with behavior that is based on duty or is good but is selfish? And how do we move from selfish behavior to selfless behavior or loving behavior? This is really important in our marriages. It's really important in our relationship with God. It's really important in our relationship with our friends and with our family. How do we move from selfish behavior to selfless behavior? How do we move from duty to love? Well, according to verse 17, what brings Asaph back in line, what changes his perspective? That's the question. According to verse 17, what brings him back in line? What changes his perspective? What helps to heal his envy? In my message, I talked about 3 things that help to heal his envy. The first is in verse 17. The second is in verses 18 through 20. What other conclusion does Asaph come to in helping to heal his envy? And then third, and it's in the very last verse, finally in verse 18, and I think it's the greatest way to overcome envy. What is Asaph's third conclusion about how he overcame envy? Asaph realizes that present realities are not final realities. How does this understanding that present is not final, how does this understanding, how can this understanding help all of us in our battle with envy? Well, we're going to finish our small group by just remembering our application. Maybe you made some commitments on Sunday during the message. Maybe you and God had some conversations. And so we want to take this secret or at least semi-private emotion. Maybe you share it with a best friend or with a spouse or even with children. That's bad. The psalmist talked about how destructive that can be. How do we take this secret semi-private emotion and we change it? Well, we do that by confessing it to God. Confessing, number one, that we use earthly measures. Confessing, number two, that in the process we tear other people down. People that are created in the image of God, we destroy them in our mind. And then number three, that we confess that we want God to be built up. We want Him to succeed. We want to celebrate Him. Well, I hope that you have a nice time talking about envy. That seems like a strange thing to say. And I look forward to seeing you next Sunday as we talk about Psalm 119. God bless.